Mexico should be rich, and not rich as in having a bit of money, rich in the sense of being loaded. Its geographical location next to the United States, with which it has a free trade agreement, is excellent. Its lands contain the 5th largest oil reserves in the world, and it has access to both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. And with the macro figures, it's a similar story. Unemployment is the 4th lowest in the G20 group, inflation is 4%, and its public debt is barely 40%. On paper, Mexicans could be as rich as Americans. The problem? Well, they're not. Mexico is very poor, so much so that its per capita income is equivalent to 1/3 of that of Spain or Italy. But what if the land of the Aztecs' fortunes were about to change? Take a look.
Mexico overtakes China as the leading source of goods imported by US.
Mexico could become the industrial brother of the Yankees. Until a few years ago, China was the world's great factory, but over time, labor costs have skyrocketed. These days, geopolitical tensions with Uncle Sam are running high, and companies are already looking for new locations to set up factories outside China. Mexico is the ideal candidate for companies such as Apple or Tesla to set up their new factories. Firstly, because of geographic proximity. Secondly, because it has a free trade agreement with the United States. Thirdly, because of its cheap labor force. And finally, because Mexico already has many factories. It already has industrial experience working hand in hand with the US in sectors such as the automobile industry. So now the question is, could Mexico become the new technological and industrial center of America? Is this the opportunity to make the country wealthy once and for all? Well, I'm sorry to give you bad news. It's not going to be easy. Mexico is close to losing the opportunity due to its politicians. Other countries such as Thailand may overtake it and leave it penniless. Why? In this video, we tell you all about it. Earlier, we showed you the news headline, Mexico has overtaken China as a US supplier. According to this headline, Mexico should already be a superpower over the Asians. The problem is that this news is false. What has really happened is not that Mexico has boosted its exports, which as you can see are quite stagnant, but that according to official data, China is collapsing. I say here official data because not even this data is true. In reality, what is happening is that China has many tariffs, and to avoid them, they send their products through third countries. In other words, it's not that Mexico exports more than China, it's that China is hiding its figures behind other countries. And guess what? One of these countries is Mexico.
China circumvents US tariffs by shipping more goods via Mexico.
In other words, it's no longer just that Mexico's exports to Uncle Sam are stagnant, but that a portion of those exports are actually products from China. This explains why companies from the Asian giant have started to invest a lot of money in the Aztec land. It is the perfect intermediary. Now, at the beginning of the video, we talked about Apple and Tesla, American companies that could set up new Mexican factories. The question is, are they doing it? Well, not really. Foreign direct investment is pathetic. 2023 registered the worst figure in the last 10 years. What's more, most of these investments are directed to service sectors such as insurance or finance. So no, it doesn't look like companies are lining up to be in Mexico either. In fact, although manufacturing employment is stagnant and far from its pre-pandemic trend, after COVID, some industries such as automobiles have returned to normal operation. But beyond that, stagnation dominates Mexico. The conclusion, the bottom line, is no. Mexico is not taking advantage of its opportunity to get rich. Mexican industry is neither flourishing nor expected to be. The question is, why not? Let's take a look.
Ideal conditions, disastrous politicians.
A country cannot prosper without good infrastructure. Roads, railroads, airports, internet lines, and in that department, Mexico is a disaster. For starters, many parts of the country still lack high-speed internet access and broadband penetration is relatively low. On top of that, roads are less safe than investing in Venezuelan public debt. On average, 36 trucks are stolen every day, and the number of thefts has doubled since 2016. 75% of robberies occur on the country's main highways, and with railroads, it's a similar story. All this makes Mexico the country in the Americas with the second highest number of thefts in the transportation sector. And take note, we're not talking about petty criminals here. We're talking about organized crime leviathans. What they do is get informants from inside the company, identify the trucks with the most valuable cargo, learn their route, and wham! Money heist becomes child's play. The result? Companies such as Coca-Cola have already closed factories in the country.
Because of predatory cartels operating along highways and around distribution centers, in 2018, Coca-Cola FEMSA closed its facilities in Ciudad Altamirano.
Things don't seem to be getting better. The outgoing president, López Obrador, has downplayed security with his iconic slogan of more hugs and fewer bullets. On top of that, his administration has pursued the end of the Merida Initiative, a security framework that has guided the last 15 years of security policy with the US. Security is neither present in Mexico nor expected anytime soon, but there is another factor to be added: blockades. Mexican highways are often paralyzed due to strikes. Protesters from the transportation sector do not exactly help to promote smooth and trouble-free traffic flow in the country. Given all these factors, it's no wonder that many companies are reluctant to invest in the country, and things don't seem to be getting any better. AMLO's government is not investing in useful infrastructure. For example, an airport was to be built in Mexico City that would quadruple the country's passenger capacity. In other words, more business travelers, more air freight, more security. The problem? The government cancelled the airport. After that, investment by foreign companies plummeted. A golden opportunity for attracting investors to the country was lost. And you may be wondering, well then, where is all the government money going? The answer is to projects of dubious profitability. An example of this is the Tren Maya, or Maya Train, a railroad network in the south of the country that has cost more than 3 times as much as predicted. A bigger problem than that is that there is hardly any industry in the south of Mexico, and as far as business opportunities with the US are concerned, it does not seem to contribute much. Where it will contribute is to Pemex, the national oil company. The Mayan train was designed largely to support that company. So what's the problem? The problem is that Pemex is the most indebted oil company in the world. It's basically a money pit, and it seems that the government is focused only on rescuing it instead of supporting truly profitable industries. And another example of this is the Dos Bocas refinery, another of AMLO's megalomaniacal projects that, once again, fatten the public oil company, instead of the money being allocated to internet networks, schools, or universities. And Visualeconomik community, this leads us to Mexico's next problem: energy. To attract US companies, a key element is the transition to clean energy sources. First, because they are much cheaper, and second, because companies such as Apple are increasingly insisting on decarbonizing their production processes. However, Mexican electricity is dirty as hell. The reason is that AMLO has forced the national power grid to prioritize the purchase of electricity from a state-owned company. In other words, private companies that want to invest in clean energy do not play on equal terms with state-owned companies that draw their energy mainly from fossil fuels. The result? More expensive, more polluting, and less reliable electricity. A cocktail that scares away more companies than Chavez at his peak. But let's move on. Mexico is the OECD country with the 3rd most expensive housing prices, measured in mortgage burden for low-income people. There is limited access to credit. Because, no, Mexico is not like Europe, where you can easily go to the bank to ask for a mortgage, even less so when many people are paid under the table. So in the end, this translates into many citizens not being able to buy a house. But on top of that, the rental market functions poorly. There is not a large supply of public housing, and as a consequence, many households end up in informal settlements far from the cities. These people have a more difficult time accessing jobs in urban areas. Public transportation is barely available, and this takes a lot of labor away from industrial centers. Nevertheless, even if all these problems were solved, nothing would work without one key issue: politics. AMLO is a leftist, a Latin American leftist. And what does that mean? It means that the US is not exactly his most natural ally. López Obrador welcomed the Cuban president as a guest of honor while blaming the US embargo for his problems. He also welcomed Nicolás Maduro and proposed that the Organization of American States be replaced by a multilateral organization that does not respond to the interests of the United States. What's more, he has publicly accused the Biden administration of interfering in Mexico's internal affairs. And let's be clear, if Mexico wants to trade with and receive US investments, it's probably a good idea not to blow up diplomatic relations. The US needs a reliable, secure, cooperative, and prosperous partner. Although it must be said, the gringos haven't done much on their side either. Since the arrival of Donald Trump, Uncle Sam has put pressure on Mexico in its trade relations. Up until then, there was a free trade agreement called NAFTA, which was very protective and gave liberties to Mexicans. However, to protect American industry, Trump extorted the Mexicans to sign the USMCA, a new agreement that forced Mexico to implement regulations harmful to its industry. For instance, until the signing of the USMCA, Mexican automakers could compete with low wages. Yet, this new agreement obliges them to pay a minimum wage of $16 an hour, $16 an hour, in at least 40% of the manufacturing chain. At the same time, under the former agreement, factories could also buy almost 40% of cheap supplies from China. But the new agreement obliges Mexico to buy at least 75% from North American countries, which naturally drives up their costs. And you may be thinking, why did the Mexican government sign this new agreement? The reason is that they had no choice. It was either that, or Trump's threat to eliminate the previous free trade agreement entirely. And take note, because it's not just Trump. Joe Biden doesn't seem to want to invest big in the neighboring country either, but rather use them as a crutch for very specific issues.
White House report on critical products noted that international cooperation was only needed to secure supplies of critical goods that we will not make in sufficient quantities at home.
If we add to all this high taxes with corporate rates at 30%, corruption rooted in the institutions, and a growing public deficit, what can I say? It doesn't seem that Mexico is going to be able to take advantage of the wave. Proof of this is that GDP per capita has been stagnant for 10 years. It's true that in the last 2 years, it has grown slightly, but without a doubt, the Aztec country is far from advancing economically, and it is still far below its pre-pandemic level. That AMLO's role in the economy has been a disaster is not questioned by almost any economist. Now, if you have been following the news, you will have seen that AMLO is no longer president. Claudia Sheinbaum, his successor, has taken power. The question is, what awaits Mexico now? And does it have the time to seize the opportunity? Well, let's take a look.
The road to riches.
Sorry to disappoint you, but it doesn't look like Claudia Sheinbaum is going to fix the problems. Following her election, the stock market plummeted 5.7%, the biggest drop since 2008 and the pandemic. First of all, Sheinbaum is still a Latin American leftist. She's not exactly friendly to private enterprise, does not promise to make tax changes, and seems to be continuing with AMLO's megalomaniac projects, and with continuing to fatten Pemex, the state-owned oil company that only loses money. Sheinbaum has also promised to increase social programs, which will mean even more public spending, more debt, and foreseeably higher taxes. There is, however, one point on which Sheinbaum seems more aligned with industry than AMLO: clean energy. The new president has a PhD in environmental engineering. Supposedly, she is more in favor of investing in clean, cheap, and reliable energy. The problem is that she will probably want to do it through state-owned companies. And without investment and private companies, what can I say? As is happening in Pemex, leaving all energy renovation in the hands of the public sector is akin to shooting yourself in the foot. It remains to be seen what will end up happening. However, one thing must be made clear. Even if Mexico does not take advantage of its industrial opportunities in the short term, as long as the US continues to maintain its industrial battle with China, alliances will be increasingly likely. Maybe not now, but in the future, new policymakers may make it possible. Mexico continues to have an enviable location, wonderful citizens, and with enough time, it's possible that a political revolution could take place in the country. And if you don't believe me, look at what's happening in Argentina. And if they've been able to do it, anyone can. Whatever the outcome, having reached this point, it's now your turn. Do you think Sheinbaum will follow a different path than AMLO? Will Mexico be able to benefit from the geopolitical environment? Let's start a debate in the comments. If you like the video, please like it, subscribe so that you don't miss any future ones, and see you in the next one. All the best. See you soon.